Picture this, you just bought a new phone. It's the one you've been wanting for 6 months. You open the box, peel the plastic off the screen, and for the first few days, you are genuinely happy. You test the camera, customize the screen, show it off to your friends. But then a week goes by and you stop noticing it in your hand. The phone becomes just a phone. And then, a month later, a new model comes out. And suddenly, you feel like yours isn't quite right anymore. It's not worse, it's just not it. And there you are, looking at prices and thinking about buying again. This isn't about greed or weakness. This is about how the world we live in is designed. It's a system where marketing doesn't just sell you things. It sells you a feeling of lack. A place where happiness isn't measured by what you have, but by what you don't have yet. You see up to 500 ads a day. Of course, you don't remember a single one, but the feeling lingers. The feeling that you're falling behind, that others are living more vibrant lives, and that you need to buy something to catch up. And here's the paradox. We are living in the wealthiest time in human history. We have more stuff, more opportunities, and more access to comfort than any generation before us. Yet studies show we haven't become happier. In developed countries, life satisfaction levels have stagnated, and in some places, they've even dropped. The economy grows, but happiness doesn't. How did this happen? Consumer culture promised freedom and joy, but it's making us more anxious and poorer, both financially and emotionally. In this video, we're going to break down how this insidious machine works, how it was built, why it's so effective, and why it can't deliver what it promises. Now let's get into the history. It's the late 19th century, and the Industrial Revolution is changing the world. Factories, assembly lines, and mass production appear. In 1913, Henry Ford launches the first assembly line. And suddenly, it turns out, you can produce goods faster, cheaper, and in much larger volumes than ever before. By the 1920s, industry in the US and Europe reaches unprecedented productivity. Refrigerators, washing machines, cars. These are no longer luxuries, but mass market goods. And then, an unexpected problem arises. People buy what they need, and then they stop. Basic needs are met, factories are running at full capacity. But demand can't keep up with supply. Business faces a crisis of overproduction. Corporations are faced with the question, how do you force people to buy more than they need? The answer to that question didn't come from economics, but from psychology. In 1928, a book titled Propaganda is published. Its author is Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud. In this book, Bernays wrote, "Mass production is profitable only if the rhythm of sales is maintained. Today, supply must actively create its corresponding demand. We cannot wait until the public asks for a product. We must maintain constant contact through advertising and propaganda to assure a continuous demand." And this wasn't just his theory. He worked for tobacco companies, the auto industry, and fashion brands. One of his most famous cases was the Torches of Freedom campaign. At the time, smoking was taboo for women, so Bernays organized a stunt. A group of women at a public parade in New York demonstratively lit cigarettes, calling them Torches of Freedom. The press picked it up as a feminist gesture, but in reality, it was a paid PR stunt. As a result, the percentage of female smokers in America rose from 5% to 18% in 10 years. And this was a turning point. The industry realized you don't have to wait for people to have a need. You can create it out of thin air. You can link a product to the desire to be free, successful, and modern. And people will buy not because they need the item, but because it's part of who they want to be. By the end of the 1920s, consumption becomes a new religion. Buying is progress. Charles Kettering, head of research at General Motors, put it this way: "The key is to keep the consumer dissatisfied, to constantly create new reasons for them to buy and never let them stop." The Great Depression and World War II temporarily paused this process, but the foundation was already laid. After the war, everything returns, only on a much grander scale. The 1950s in the US become an era of an unprecedented consumer boom. The economy shifts from military production to civilian goods. Average family income doubles in a decade. Unemployment is low. The government actively encourages consumption. Americans are told, by buying more, you help the country grow. Historian Elizabeth Cohen writes, "A good consumer, devoted to the principle of more and better, was a good citizen." Consumption becomes a patriotic act. Between 1945 and 1949, Americans bought 20 million refrigerators, 21 million cars, and 5.5 million stoves. By the mid-50s, almost every family has a car and a TV. Home ownership rates rose from 44% to 62%. And then another key tool appears: bank credit. There's a legend that it started by accident. Businessman Frank McNamara forgot his wallet at a restaurant in 1950 and couldn't pay. Humiliating. So he came up with the Diners Club, a card that allowed you to pay without cash. A few years later, Bank Americard appears, the prototype of today's Visa. By the early 70s, about 100 million credit cards had been issued in the US. Many people received them simply by mail, without even asking. Banks mailed cards out by the millions, with interest rates around 15 to 20%. Expensive, but convenience reigned supreme. And here's what's important. Studies show that people with cards spend 30 to 50% more than if they paid with cash. The psychology is simple. When you don't see the money leaving your hands, you don't feel the pain of spending. And credit is only half the battle, because the American tax system pushes people to spend even more. How does it work? In America, federal income tax can go up to 37%, plus state and local taxes. Sounds like a huge burden, right? For example, with a salary of $100,000 a year, you might have to give up about $20,000, $30,000, depending on the state. And if your income is above average, you hit that 37%. But the trick is that the system allows you to lower your taxable base through expenses. For example, did you buy a house with a mortgage? The mortgage interest lowers your taxes. Paid for health insurance, education, charity, even expenses like a computer or a car for business. All of this can be used to reduce your tax burden. The result is, the more you spend, the less you pay the state. For the average American, the logic is simple. Earned 100K, you can give 30 of that to the government. Or spend that 30K on yourself and get a tax deduction. I think it's clear what the majority chooses. The system is built so that it's economically more profitable to spend than to save. And business understands this perfectly. Corporations write off everything as expenses, from office rent to corporate parties. And ordinary citizens, they buy houses, cars, insurance, because it's an investment in lowering taxes. And just try to stop playing this game. Start saving. Well, now you pay taxes on those savings, plus inflation eats away at their value. So people take out loans, buy more, use those purchases to lower taxes, and take out new loans to service the old ones. This is an economic trap disguised as freedom of choice. You seem to decide what to buy, but the choice has already been made for you. And just like that, step by step, post-war America turned into a giant consumption machine. Advertising shaped desire, credit provided the means, and the tax system made it the only rational choice. This is how the model that would define the economy of the following decades was formed. A model where consumption is not a means, but an end, where happiness is measured by the quantity of things, and economic growth depends on how successfully people can be kept in a state of constant want. On paper, it worked perfectly. The economy grew, people bought, corporations got rich, but then psychologists and statistics got involved. And that's when it turned out that this system has a fundamental problem. It doesn't make people happier. And here is why. Let's travel back to 1974. Economist Richard Easterlin publishes a study that flips the understanding of the link between wealth and well-being upside down. He analyzes data from different countries and discovers a strange thing. Within a single country, rich people are indeed happier than poor people. That's logical. But when a country as a whole becomes richer over time, the average happiness of the population does not increase. A clear example of this is the US from 1946 to 1970. GDP per capita grew exponentially. Incomes rose, consumption rose. But here's the kicker. Life satisfaction levels stayed about the same. This phenomenon was named the Easterlin paradox. How is that possible? If money gives access to comfort, safety, and opportunity, why doesn't it give happiness? Easterlin suggested that after reaching a certain income level where basic needs are covered, further growth stops affecting subjective well-being. There is a saturation point, and beyond that lies a plateau. Later, researchers refined this idea. In 2010, psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton analyzed US data and discovered emotional well-being, that is, how joyful or calm you feel day to day, stops growing after an annual income of about $75,000 per person. At the same time, cognitive life evaluation, how you rate your life overall on a scale from 0 to 10, continues to rise slightly after this mark, but very slowly, with diminishing returns. Why is this? Two psychological mechanisms are to blame, undermining the link between money and happiness. The first is the so-called hedonic adaptation, or, as it's also called, the hedonic treadmill. The essence is simple. We get used to improvements very quickly. A new car, a new apartment, a new phone, they bring joy at first, but then become the norm. And to feel that lift again, you need something even newer. Back in the 70s, a study showed that people who won a large sum in the lottery were not significantly happier a year later than ordinary people. They adapted. What seemed like incredible happiness became mundane. And the data confirms this. People partially adapt to marriage in a couple of years. To a raise in income, same thing. To buying a house, same thing. The joy is temporary. Neurophysiologically, this is also explainable. The brain's reward system, the dopamine system, reacts to novelty, but then sensitivity decreases. After intense pleasure, the brain compensates for the excess by temporarily lowering overall dopamine levels. A crash effect occurs. Slight apathy, a need for a new stimulus. The second mechanism is social comparison. We evaluate our well-being not in absolute terms, but relative to others. Are we happy with our income? That depends on how much our colleagues, neighbors, and friends earn. This, by the way, isn't news. People have always done this. But previously, the circle of comparison was narrow. Your village, your neighborhood. Today, thanks to social media, you compare yourself with millions of perfect images from all over the world. Economist Thorstein Veblen described the phenomenon of conspicuous consumption back in the late 19th century, when the rich buy things not for utility, but for status in the eyes of others. Modern studies confirm many people would prefer to earn, say, $50,000 a year if their neighbors earn $30,000. Than to earn $100,000 if their neighbors earn $200,000. That is, they are ready to sacrifice absolute good for a relative advantage. This explains why income growth for the whole society doesn't increase happiness. When everyone gets richer at the same time, relative positions don't change. You haven't overtaken others, so you haven't won. There is even a special term for such goods, positional goods. These are things whose value is determined by how they place you relative to those around you. A prestigious car, designer clothes, a watch. Their utility lies in rarity and price. If everyone had a Ferrari, it would lose its status. People consider income, houses and cars to be the most positional categories. They are ready to sacrifice absolute levels for superiority over others. But vacations or environmental improvements are less positional. Here, people don't compete. If the air gets cleaner or everyone gets more time off, it doesn't devalue your own well-being. Economists compare these to an arms race or a situation at a stadium. If one person stands up to see better, the others are forced to stand up too. In the end, everyone is standing, everyone is uncomfortable, but no one sees better than before. Robert Frank, an economist from Cornell, calls this positional arms races, collectively irrational behavior that looks rational individually. He suggests regulating this through luxury taxes to lower the pressure of the race and direct resources toward public goods. The median income of the average American hasn't really grown since the 1970s, while the incomes of the wealthy have skyrocketed. Inequality grew, and most people felt like they were falling behind. Even if their absolute standard of living improved, their relative one worsened. Average life satisfaction in the US in the 2010s was at about the same level as in the 1970s, despite the economy doubling. The happiest countries in the world, consistently, year after year, are Finland, Denmark, Iceland. And they aren't the richest by GDP, but they are rich enough to cover basic needs. Beyond that, intangible factors come to the forefront. Low corruption, high trust, strong social support, good environment, freedom of choice. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development today recommends that countries measure not just GDP, but the subjective well-being of citizens. Most members of this organization already regularly collect data on life satisfaction. Many of them have also included well-being indicators in their national strategies. This is an acknowledgement of a simple fact. Economic growth in itself does not guarantee happiness. If growth leads to more inequality, stress, and environmental damage, it can actually worsen the quality of life for the majority. But if economists and psychologists understand this, why does the system continue to work the same way? Why do we keep buying, even though we know it won't bring lasting happiness? Because over the last 30 years, capitalism has learned to sell not just things, it has learned to sell meaning, identity, and emotions, and it does so brilliantly. In the 1990s, the world begins to change drastically. Governments remove restrictions for business, open borders for trade, and competition between companies intensifies. And in this race, the winner isn't the one who makes the best product, it's the one who can tell the best story. A brand stops being just a logo or a name. It becomes an intangible asset worth more than all the company's factories and warehouses combined. A brand is a promise, a feeling, a part of who you consider yourself to be. Take Nike, for example. In 1988, the company launches the Just Do It campaign. Not buy our sneakers, not they are comfortable and high quality, but overcome yourself. The ads show not the product, but ordinary people and stars running, jumping, training, winning. Michael Jordan, Serena Williams, Cristiano Ronaldo. The message is singular. If you wear Nike, you aren't just buying shoes. You are choosing an identity. You are someone who doesn't give up. The numbers are impressive. Nike's ad budget grew from $3 million to $300 million in a year. And 10 years later, it was already $3 billion a year. The company wasn't selling sneakers. It was selling a dream of the version of yourself you want to become. And it works. Air Jordan sneakers, released in 1985 for $65 a pair, were being resold in shortages for over $100. Young people saw them not just as footwear, but as a status symbol. Over the last decades, the athletic footwear market has grown to global proportions. By 2025, its volume is estimated at almost $97 billion. Nike still leads this sport. The company's footwear division alone brings in about $30 billion a year, with over $12 billion coming from the North American market. Now let's take Apple. In 1984, the company releases a commercial for the Macintosh during the Super Bowl. The spot lasts 60 seconds, airs only once, and goes down in history. Later, the slogan appears, "Think different." And again, this isn't about a computer. It's about who you are. Creative, independent, progressive. Apple doesn't sell technology. It sells membership to a club of people who see the world in their own way. When the iPhone comes out in 2007, people stand in line overnight, not because the phone is functionally better than others, but because it's Apple. It's part of an identity. Sales grow from 1.4 million devices in 2007 to 216 million in 2017. Margins on iPhones reach 60%. People are willing to pay not for hardware, but for the feeling of belonging. Here's another example, Starbucks. In 1971, it's one coffee shop in Seattle. 50 years later, it has 20,000 locations worldwide. What does Starbucks sell? Coffee? No. Starbucks sells the third place. Not home, not work, but the space in between. A place where you can sit with a laptop, meet friends, and feel part of the urban rhythm. Company founder Howard Schultz said, "We don't sell a drink, we sell an experience." And people agree to pay $10 for a latte instead of $3 for a regular coffee. Because it's not about caffeine. It's about the atmosphere, the ritual. It's about the fact that you are an urban, modern, successful person who can afford to start the morning at Starbucks. By 2020, the company is spending about $250 million a year on marketing. But the main advertisement is the network itself. The logo on a cup in a passerby's hand, a photo on social media, brand recognition that needs no explanation. And the consumer isn't buying a thing, they are buying a version of themselves. or more accurately, a version of themselves they want to show the world. Studies show people tend to identify with the brands they use. The choice between iPhone and Android for many isn't a technical question. It's a question of belonging. There's even the blue bubble versus green bubble phenomenon in messaging. iPhone owners perceive themselves as part of a more prestigious group because their messages appear blue, while Android users show up as green. The problem is, when things become part of your identity, any threat to them is perceived as a threat to yourself. And this puts capitalism in the perfect position. Because identity is something that is never finished. You can always become better, more modern, more successful. You can always buy something that brings you closer to an ideal, which is, of course, unattainable. Because as soon as you get close, the bar rises. In the fashion industry, up to 60% of an item's price is branding, advertising, and distribution. You aren't paying for the fabric, you're paying for the logo, the brand history, and the feeling that you belong to a certain circle. And the system works. People buy again and again, not because they need to, but because it has become a way to express oneself in a world where personality is measured by visible markers. But if brands learned to sell identity through things, social media took this logic to the absolute extreme. Now, the product isn't what you buy. The product is you, your attention, your time, your emotions, and this changed everything. In 2004, Facebook launches. In 2010, Instagram. In 2016, TikTok. In 20 years, social media went from experimental technology to the primary habitat for billions of people and brought with it a new economic model. Before, you paid for goods with money. Now you pay with attention. And that attention is the most valuable resource of the 21st century. The average person in 2026 spends 2 hours and 27 minutes a day on social media. Teenagers spend more, from 3 to 5 hours daily. A TikTok user spends an average of 95 minutes a day scrolling the feed. And this isn't an accident. It is the result of meticulous design. Platforms don't compete to make you happier. They compete to keep you there as long as possible. Because the more time you spend in the app, the more ads they can show you. And the higher the revenue. Advertisers pay for your attention. Platforms sell that attention. And you are the product. To keep you, algorithms are optimized not for your well-being, but for your engagement. What holds people best? Correct. Strong emotions. Surprise, outrage, envy, fear, delight. Studies show content that evokes anger or anxiety spreads faster than positive or neutral content. News about scandals, conflicts, and disasters gets more clicks. The algorithm understands this and starts showing you increasingly emotionally charged material. This is called the attention economy, and it has side effects. Social comparison. Only now with millions of people simultaneously. Before, you compared yourself to colleagues, neighbors, friends. Now you compare yourself to idealized images of millions of people around the globe. You see someone else's vacation in the Maldives, someone else's perfect body, someone else's new house, car, wardrobe. And involuntarily, you start to feel that your life is not vibrant enough, not successful enough, not beautiful enough. In 2012, researchers Cho and Edge found that active Facebook users are more likely to agree with the statement. Others have happier and fairer lives than I do. Because people post the best parts of their lives on social media, but the brain perceives it as reality and compares your ordinary life with someone else's edited one. As a result, you get envy, dissatisfaction, and a feeling of falling behind. Even if objectively, you're doing fine. Why is it so hard to just close the app? Because another mechanism is at work, the dopamine loop. Every like, every notification, every new post is a micro reward for the brain. Stanford neurobiologist Anna Lemke notes that the mechanism of apps is similar to that of psychoactive substances. That is, things that cause addiction. A fast, frequent, unpredictable stimulus. This creates dependency. The brain starts demanding constant stimulation, and in its absence, a mood dip, anxiety, and boredom set in. After prolonged scrolling, people often feel a worsening of mood. Not during, but after. This is the so-called dopamine crash. The brain compensates for the excess stimulation with a temporary drop in neurotransmitter levels. The result is apathy, and the only way to relieve it is to open the app again. And here appears another layer of the problem, the monetization of identity. In social media, everyone becomes their own brand. You curate your feed, choose which photos to post, which moments to show, what image to broadcast. You are building a storefront of yourself, and it is a storefront of consumption. What you wear, where you vacation, what you eat, what books you read, all of these are identity markers. And the better this storefront looks, the more approval you get. A new form of pressure emerges. You don't just have to live. You have to live in a way that looks good in the feed. When on vacation, need to photograph the right moment. Choose the angle and filter. Bought a new thing? Need to show it off. Otherwise, what's the point? A phenomenon appears. People buy things not for themselves, but for content. The fast fashion industry grew precisely on this. Fast fashion is when brands release new collections every 2 or 3 weeks. Clothes cost pennies and are worn a couple of times. From 2000 to 2015, global clothing production doubled, from 100 to 200 billion units a year. Meanwhile, the average number of times an item is worn dropped by 36%. Things are bought, worn a couple of times, and thrown away, because the main value is not in use, but in demonstration. In 2016, the global influencer marketing market was valued at almost $2 billion. In 2021, already $14 billion. and by 2025, it grew to $22.5 billion. Brands realized a recommendation from a popular blogger works better than traditional advertising because an influencer isn't a corporation. They are a person you trust. They seem like one of us. And when they show a product, it's perceived not as an ad, but as advice from a friend. The nuance is that behind every such piece of advice, there may be a contract. The influencer gets money or product for the mention, but the audience often doesn't realize it. Or realizes it, but falls under the influence anyway. A whole industry emerges, the creator economy. Millions of people try to earn from their posts, videos, streams. By 2023, it was estimated at about $250 billion. The forecast for 2027 is $480 billion. Sounds impressive, but here are the details. According to Goldman Sachs, only 4% of content creators earn more than $100,000 a year. The rest earn either absolutely nothing or pennies. Platforms and top influencers take the lion's share. Meanwhile, millions of ordinary users spend time trying to monetize their personality but get almost nothing. And here's the paradox. Social media was created as a tool for connection, but many studies show excessive social media use is associated with feelings of loneliness. Passive consumption of the feed, that is, scrolling without interacting, correlates with worsening mood and lower life satisfaction. Algorithms are not neutral. They don't just show what you like, they show what will make you stay. And often that is content that disturbs you. The news is full of negativity, scandals, conflicts, disasters, because fear and outrage hold attention better than calm. By some estimates, for every one positive news story, there are 10 negative ones. As a result, a distorted perception of reality is formed. The world seems more dangerous, more unfair, worse than it actually is. And this feeds anxiety. And an anxious person is the ideal consumer. They are prone to seeking comfort and often find it in shopping. The system closes the loop. You scroll the feed, see the perfect lives of others, feel dissatisfaction. You see an ad, buy this, become better. You buy, experience a brief emotional lift, and then adaptation, and back into the feed. This is the logic of the attention economy. Platforms maximize engagement. Advertisers maximize sales. Algorithms optimize for metrics. And metrics don't measure happiness. They measure time and clicks. And in this system, your well-being isn't the goal. It is a side effect that is often ignored. Now let's travel to the 2010s. Against the backdrop of peak consumer culture, a counter-movement appears. Minimalism, conscious consumption, and digital detox. People start getting tired. In 2011, Japan's Marie Kondo releases the book The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. The idea is simple. Get rid of things that don't spark joy. The book becomes a global bestseller. Google searches for the word decluttering triple from 2010 to 2019. Documentaries about minimalism appear on Netflix, blogs about capsule wardrobes, a movement called 33 items instead of 300. People discover accumulation didn't bring happiness, and they start getting pleasure from letting go. The secondhand market explodes. Used clothing grows 3 times faster than new fashion. The forecast for 2029 is $367 billion. Right now, it's about $200 billion. People sell, swap, and give away what they bought in excess. But the system doesn't give up, it adapts. Conscious consumption appears as a new product. Eco-packaging, sustainable collections, ethical fashion. H&M launches the Conscious line. It sounds good, but critics point out the materials aren't much more eco-friendly and the fast fashion model itself remains unsustainable. This is called greenwashing, when companies pretend to be eco-friendly, but essentially change nothing. The wellness industry continues to grow. In 2025, it is valued at roughly $7.3 trillion, according to the Global Wellness Institute. Vitamins, detoxes, meditation apps, mindfulness courses, even the attempt to escape consumption is being commercialized. But not everything is marketing. There are real shifts, and here is what unites them. People are starting to value access over ownership, experience over accumulation, quality over quantity. It is estimated that one car in a car-sharing fleet does the work of about 11 personal cars, since most cars sit idle for 23 hours a day, while a shared car is constantly moving. People get access to mobility without needing to own. Less expense, less maintenance stress, smaller ecological footprint. Airbnb changed the housing market. By 2025, more than 8 million active listings worldwide and over 1 billion guest arrivals cumulatively. This is a new experience, living like a local, not like a tourist. And subscriptions do the same with content. Music, movies, software, everything on demand. The average urban family in the US in 2026 has 9 active subscriptions. It's convenient. Although it creates a new form of dependency, you are constantly paying for access. And here is the key observation backed by data. Money spent on experiences, travel, concerts, education, brings more satisfaction than money spent on material things. The reasons are simple. Experiences are shared with others, strengthening bonds. Memories often become even more valuable over time, but a thing gets boring. In the US, in a 2019 survey on consumer preferences, 76% of young people stated they would prefer to spend on experiences rather than things. Here is the essence. The problem isn't consumption itself. The problem is that we measure value incorrectly. We think that more means better, but that only works up to a certain point, after which more is just more. And the alternative here isn't about giving up everything, but about shifting focus from ownership to participation, from things to experience, from quantity to quality, from status to connection. The system won't change by itself. Its foundation is that the economy must grow, and economic growth depends on people buying more and more. But you can change how you participate in it. You can ask yourself before a purchase, do I need this, or was I sold a desire? You can choose experience over things, or stop comparing yourself to other people's storefronts on social media. And perhaps most importantly, you can allow yourself to say, enough. Consumer culture promised happiness through things. The data shows the opposite. Happiness is not a function of income after a certain levels. It is the quality of connections. It is a sense of meaning. It is the balance between what you have and what you want. Because true freedom comes when you can stop. What do you think? Is it possible to break out of this cycle, or is the system too strong? And do you remember the last time you bought something that genuinely made you happier? Leave a comment. It'll be interesting to read your thoughts. Support us with a like and a subscribe. It helps us make more cool and interesting breakdowns. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.